sees soldiers.
What's going on, everyone? It's Semp. Welcome back to the channel. There's been a lot of theories and overall talk about who the actual villain of WandaVision is. So let's discuss that and why I think the villain isn't Mephisto, but actually someone who I've been saying it is from the start. So spoiler warnings, of course, just in case. Before we do start though, if you're new to the channel or if you just like Marvel, the MCU, comics, and everything in between, subscribe to the channel and do leave a like if you enjoy. I've noticed that a lot of you aren't subscribed who are watching these videos, so click that red button. Other than that, let's get into the video. Let's go. The memes and idea that Mephisto is the villain is so overwhelming right now to the point where I can't wait to get to the reveal any longer. There's of course tons of references to Mephisto technically and the devil, but I don't think the villain is actually him. I actually think it's Nightmare, and I'll tell you why. So Nightmare was rumored to be the DS2 villain because of the horror aspect that Scott Derrickson wanted, and we knew he left due to creative differences, but Raimi, another director who likes horror, hopped on board, and I doubt they changed the villain. Of course, script updates were made, but I doubt the entire thing was redone, and there have been rumors that Nightmare was cast a while back. Also, being that Doctor Strange 2 and WandaVision connect, it's safe to say that it's a villain tailored more towards Doctor Strange, which would make a whole lot of sense being the multiverse villain of a huge blockbuster movie. Because even though WandaVision standalone has been amazing, this is truly setting up the Doctor Strange sequel more than anything. A very reliable source, Charles Murphy, who did not say 100% to trust him on this one, but like I said, he heard that Nightmare was cast and was going to be revealed in WandaVision. It would make sense that he's revealed in WandaVision also, because for him to come around and only stick around for a couple episodes, I highly doubt it. That's why I think that's where the Doctor Strange 2 connection does take place. Charles is damn pretty reputable also, and had a ton of info about the show regarding the 9 episodes, some of the runtimes, the first week double episode, and more. So it's not to be confirmed, but the fact that he did post it and heard about the possible casting, I think it's real because he usually only posts stuff if he feels somewhat comfortable about it. But outside of that information, let's actually dive into WandaVision itself and look at some of the hints that prove that it is Nightmare who's the villain. A lot of the hints that we've been seeing in the show kind of refer that it could be either, but let's start off with the fact that Disney Plus, and this being the first Marvel show, I really don't think that they would use the devil for a multitude of reasons. Of course, because Disney does have a lot of kids subscribed to it, but also the fact that certain demographics across the world aren't too fond of using the idea of the devil. Now, obviously, this isn't the deciding factor, but I think it does play a small part. So I think what we will see is actually the villain of the actual presence of Nightmare, but he will have slight parts of Mephisto or powers that have been given to him, similar to how Hela had an aspect of Gore's powers. And of course, there's been examples of what would appear to be Mephisto in action, but there's actually way more evidence for Nightmare. I know there's been certain lines such as the devil is in the details, but I think that's actually just Marvel trying to confuse us and make us guess on the villain, because when have they ever really been that upfront with their Easter eggs? Nightmare is a villain who feeds off these souls of people who are asleep and their dreams and their fears, and as we know, WandaVision has dove deep into the trauma of Wanda Maximoff, and if you actually take a close look, everything really just seems to be her nightmares. Take a look at each commercial, for example. Strucker and Hydra, Lagos, the Stark toaster with a ticking bomb, everything is a nightmare in her mind of past trauma, and this past episode showcasing Yo Magic Snacks. Wanda is essentially the boy in this commercial. The shark represents Nightmare, and the fact that he is literally feeding off of her magic, which is keeping him alive, her trauma, her fears, her magical powers, this is what gives Nightmare life. He needs it and he lives off of that fear. When she sees dead versions of Vision and Pietro, they are also the trauma coming back to haunt her, her 2 nightmare deaths of people close to her, and really the entire Hex, in my opinion, is a nod to the basic structure of the MCU. Hexagons are everywhere, we see them in Space Jumps and the Guardians. It's basically the grid system of the universe, similar to how the grid system works for large cities. And that's why I think it's a key pointer that this villain is from another dimension, the multiverse. Everyone in the Hex is in some sort of dream state, and Vision is able to sometimes wake them up, which is another reference to Nightmare's abilities in sleeping. A lot of people also think that Wanda could possibly be the villain, but here's something that counteracts that. It's very important to notice that Wanda, besides the fact that she couldn't remember how this all started, is the fact that the hex is supposed to be the barrier, right? But Wanda actually pulls Monica into this reality. And you can see the key difference here when the beekeeper tries to go in, he actually kind of has to force himself in, but when Monica just puts her hand in, she fully gets pulled in. And then when they meet outside the hex, Monica says to her, "You trust in me, you know I'm an ally." I think this is the biggest key that Wanda isn't the villain, because she's actually low-key scared and her subconscious is suffering by a spell by Agnes or something due to Nightmare, and so she wants everything to be okay, but she knows it's not, so we know there's some sort of underlying factor here traumatizing her further. Now moving on to some more hints from episode 6, Pietro says something along the lines of, "So where have you been hiding these kids, sleeping in bed?" Now it's very subtle, but another nod that everything in this town, or everyone, is essentially sleeping or possibly dreaming. Now let's take a look at Agnes. Agnes is essentially going to be the disciple or witch of Nightmare, Agatha Harkness of course. She also says her husband's name is Ralph and that he looks better in the dark anyway. And taking a look at Nightmare, oh yeah, I think I'd rather see him in the dark as well. But it's also once again another dark, nighttime Easter egg. I think Nightmare is using her as the real world link to get closer and closer to Wanda. Agnes supposedly finds Sparky dead, but I think it was more of a soul for a soul sacrifice. Notice how Pietro comes nearly right after. If we also take a key look at the pendant or necklace that Agnes is also wearing, when Pietro shows up, he has this necklace around him and it doesn't change from the 80s into the 90s. And during episode 6, when Vision supposedly wakes Agnes up, the first thing she does is clutch for her pendant, which isn't there anymore. Because I think it's in the new form disguising Pietro as someone else. Maybe he is not the real Pietro that Wanda actually thinks he is, which is what I'm leaning towards. Agnes also knows that Vision will fight and protect Wanda until the very end. Essentially, what is powering him as the Hex he could also take down, and I think that they know that. In a recent video, I spoke about how Vision might actually be the one who has to make the sacrifice to save everyone in the Hex, including Wanda. It's possible they didn't know actually how powerful Vision is, and even though that's not his real self, he is basically Vision at the core, because Vision is more than the Mind Stone. Vision knows what's going on right now, he's powerful, and Agnes knows this, so what does she do? She knows that he's trying to find out what's outside of Westview, so let's guide him there. She tries to lure him out, and what this does is it actually keeps Wanda separated with Pietro with the twins, but Wanda, being as powerful as she is, obviously ends up saving Vision in the end, and I think this is the turning point, essentially being the last straw before Agnes and Nightmare start to make their final push. Now, Pietro showing up has been very sketchy, and when he is blasted by Wanda at the end of episode 6, he lands in a pile of hay and gravestones, and if you take a look, one of them says "not on her side." And the latest Funko Pop features a Quicksilver one labeled in quotes Pietro Maximoff. So there's something off about him. It's possible he's just another Nightmare puppet, or he actually is a faulted multiverse version, or that he possibly actually is just Nightmare in general, or that he's actually Ralph, which is a theory of mine. And the pendant and necklace switch would make sense because Agnes could have easily gave it to him since they're supposedly husband and wife. Now, I don't want to make this video too long, so I think that's enough evidence for right now. Of course, there's so much more to talk about, so if you have any comments or questions, write them down below. For all announcements and to keep up to date with my content, follow me at AnotherMarvelG on Twitter. All links to my socials are below, including where you can find the podcast. And if you liked the video, give it a thumbs up. Make sure to subscribe with the notification bells turned on. And other than that, I just want to say thank you. I'm another Marvel guy, and I'll catch y'all on a blip.